Hello again everyone, Melth here with a special video today. Thanks to all of you out there, I've just hit the milestone of 2,000 subscribers to this YouTube channel. I thought to celebrate that, I'll engage in one of my other hobbies by baking a cake. And so that anybody out there who wants to can join in the festivities, I'll be sharing my recipe and for the first time and probably the last time, making a video of me baking something. My plan for that is just crazy enough to work. I'm going to take my phone, rubber band it onto a pair of VR goggles, hang those around my neck so the camera should be hereabouts, which should be the right position to pick up both the video and the audio of me baking. In case the audio doesn't come out clear, I'll just plan to redub it like this so you can get all of my delightful mid-baking commentary. Alright, let's give this a try. So I've got my dry ingredients ready to go, and then the wet ingredients, and then on the far left I have the frosting only ingredients, including, importantly, butter to come to room temperature. Now you can wait on the frosting. You can wait until the next day even if you need to. Just make sure the butter is at room temperature so you get the ideal consistency for that frosting whenever you do choose to make it. The cake can wait. Next up I get out two 9-inch cake pans and either apply parchment paper to them or, as I did here, spray them with plenty of cooking spray. The last thing you would want would be to get your cake finished and have it tear in half because you didn't apply enough cooking spray at the beginning. So spray them now and spray them thoroughly. Next up, I start the oven, get it preheating to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that's about 175 Celsius for those of you out there with a sensible system. And then begin boiling 1 cup of water for later on. With those preparatory steps out of the way, we can move on to actually putting in our first dry ingredients, starting with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now you could use cake flour if you wanted to, but I think this recipe would benefit more from the added strength of all-purpose flour than from the fluffiness of cake flour because we have so many other dry ingredients like cocoa powder that will be going in there. And we have other ways to make it fluffy too. Next up, we want to have 2 cups of sugar. You know, sugar is an interesting commodity in world history. It's been grown for thousands of years in India and then parts of the Arabic world, but was still quite rare until the 1500s and 1600s when it began to be produced suddenly on an industrial scale with some of the first proto-factories basically in the Caribbean. Huge sugar mills being built with gears and machinery brought over from Europe, which helped kickstart the Industrial Revolution there because people were starting to turn out this machinery for the first time and then found other reasons to use it too. Next up, we'll want to put in our cocoa powder, 3/4 of a cup of that. But sometimes I'll go over on that just to have more chocolatey flavor. After all, the flavor is the reason to be eating these cakes, isn't it? So 3/4 cup is a good safe bet, but if you know you want it more chocolatey, as I do here, put in a little bit more. Next up, we're going to have our 1 teaspoon of espresso powder. In my opinion, chocolate is a flavor that really pairs well with coffee. And one reason that I devised this recipe was that I never really liked most chocolate cakes. I found most of them to be kind of bland and usually dry in texture, so I made this one that would be the opposite of that. So it uses all my favorite flavorings together here. Speaking of flavor, it's important to include plenty of salt here. Salt is a strange thing that way. As is well known, of course, at this point, it enhances many flavors, sweet ones, savory ones, and so forth, but as far as I'm aware, the mechanism chemically by which it does so remains a mystery to this day, although it has been known to be true since ancient times and a subject of proverbs and all kinds of things. And then, for this recipe, we need to have both baking powder and baking soda. 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 of baking soda. They're both leavening agents, but baking soda is just an alkaline that needs to have an acid to react with, and the buttermilk we'll be adding later on will be providing that. But there isn't really enough acid for just baking soda alone to be sufficient to leaven this big cake, so that's why we need to have both of those things here. If you did have to substitute for whatever reason, usually baking soda is about 4 times stronger than baking powder, but I do recommend having both of them for this kind of recipe. So, we can now, I think, start moving on to our wet ingredients with buttermilk here. That, as I mentioned before, is acidic, and using buttermilk instead of regular milk, besides being necessary to add an acid that the baking soda can react with, will also be helpful for the overall final consistency and texture of the cake. So it's really a great thing to bake cakes or pancakes or other things with, as is pretty well known, I think. Let's get things mixed together now, and while the mixer is going, I can move on to the next few ingredients here, I think. And I'll put that little cover on the mixer so it doesn't spray powder everywhere. I'd like to add at least 1 wet ingredient before mixing sometimes just to reduce how much spray there is, but you can do it whichever way you want to. One reason I'm doing this recipe is just that it's a relatively simple one without any complicated steps or ones where the order is absolutely crucial. I thought that would be best for my first ever cooking video. And probably my last ever one, but we'll see. So next up we have oil. Half cup of vegetable oil. And of course, remember your chemistry lessons here, measure from the base of the meniscus. Anytime I have to add oil to a recipe, I always kind of regret it, because of course you're just adding flavorless mass to your cake in this case. But you can't do without it. You need it to get the right consistency for this kind of cake. So, next up we want 2 eggs here. Now strategically I recommend that you fight them just one at a time. Try to aggro one egg out of the carton and crack that one before dealing with the other one. But I think I will live dangerously here and crack them right on the edge of the bowl. We will see if that is stylish or foolish of me. So far so good, no eggshells in the bowl. Okay, one more. Will this prove to be an act of hubris? There we go. Perfect. Next up, we'll want 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. It's strange to me to live in a time and place when people talk as if the word vanilla meant no flavor or the most generic of all flavors, when vanilla, of course, is its own unique and, in my opinion, very tasty flavor, and has been thought to be so for 500 years or so now since it was discovered during the Columbian Exchange. Although I think, oddly enough, it comes from Mesoamerica, but as far as I know, now it's mostly cultivated in the Indian Ocean islands like Madagascar and so forth. Apparently, the means of hand-pollinating the orchids that produced vanilla was first developed in that ocean, which is why it became so widespread there. And that is so labor-intensive is why it's so expensive to this day, whereas most other spices from the Age of Sail have become quite affordable in comparison. Kind of like saffron, it's also one that is very labor-intensive. Okay, so it's time for some boiling water here. Boiling water is important for chocolate cakes for a couple of reasons. First of all, of course, we use boiling water with many chocolate drinks and things like that, like hot chocolate, because it helps bring out the flavor of the cocoa powder. But also for cakes in particular, it benefits the baking powder and helps it react a little bit more and make the cake just that little bit more fluffy. So I try to drizzle in just a little tiny bit at the time here so it gets evenly spread instead of just superheating part of the batter and not helping the other parts of it. So try to get it mixed in everywhere except on me, of course. Alright, very good. Now I can just put that hot pot out of the way. Then I think it's about time to check the consistency of the cake. So I'll remove this rim and slid on the mixer and have a look. Should be quite liquidy at this point. Yeah, that's looking really good. This cake will come out to be very, very... there's a word that people hate for silly reasons, but that word rhymes with joist and hoist and foist and baritone voiced, and this cake will be very, very that thing, which I think is, of course, desirable in a cake. Right, let me stop the mixer and check the oven. So, let me get that whisk draining, and then while that's going on, I'll get the 2 pans ready, and then I'll start spreading the batter between those 2 pans to come out roughly evenly. Okay, let's get that mixer attachment off, and I'll put that aside, and then we'll see how evenly I can pour these. Doesn't need to be perfect by any means, really. You just want them to be roughly equal to one another. I'll want a scrape or 2, I think. And then I'll just, once I've got it ready, eyeball it first, and then try to even it up from there if I needed to. So it's a good start. Yeah, discretion's the better part of valor. I'll put those pans close together to minimize the amount of spillage. Easy does it. Alright. Mirror, mirror of the goo, which is higher of the 2? Try to scrape off these last remnants so I don't waste any. Alright, time for the baking itself. I'll start the timer off at 30 minutes on the low end, and just err on the side of caution because you can't unbake things. And I'll put the two pans in side by side at the middle rack of my oven. You know your own oven best, I'm sure. Just try to make sure that the two come out as evenly as possible with whatever kind of cooking apparatus you've got. While that's going, I'll work on my frosting. If your butter isn't room temperature yet, go ahead and wait a few hours if you need to, or even until the next day. It'll be just fine. But mine is ready to go. We'll be welcoming back our old friends, cocoa powder and espresso powder and vanilla extract here, and I'll pour them right over the bowl because I don't mind going over at all. What a wonderful time it is to be a baker when things like chocolate and coffee and vanilla are all freely available. Chocolate, of course, originates from eastern Mexico and nearby countries as a Mayan holy beverage, and is now cultivated mostly a continent away. So is vanilla, mostly grown in the Indian Ocean, although it originates from Mexico, and the means to hand pollinate, I believe, was discovered by a young boy who was a slave. Really remarkable discovery there, and a shame he wasn't properly rewarded for it, having revolutionized that industry. And coffee, of course, originates from Ethiopia, and then slowly spread through the Islamic world, quite often treated with suspicion by monarchs who thought that led to too much political conversation in coffee shops and the like. I'm putting in 3 sticks of butter here, by the way. Now, in the US, sticks of butter are standardized to be 1/2 cup each. I don't know if it's that way in the rest of the world, but 1.5 cups of butter is what I'm putting in there. Now to that vanilla extract. 2 teaspoons again. It always puzzled me when people talked about how this notion that vanilla and chocolate are somehow opposite flavors, which I've heard now and then. I found that to be very strange. First of all, just how could any flavors be opposites of one another? But also, chocolate and vanilla are such a great pairing, so I'm really not sure what they're talking about. So now we need powdered sugar, not granulated. When I was first learning to bake, I made that mistake once and came up with some very crunchy frosting as a result. Tasty, but crunchy. Now, you'll also want some milk for this, or if you don't have milk, you can substitute, I find, a mixture 1-to-1 of cream and water. So for 1/2 cup of milk, substitute in 1/4 cup of cream and 1/4 cup of water. It's a decent substitute, at least, if you don't keep milk around very often. Now, unlike the previous steps of the recipe, this time it's more a matter, I think, of personal taste rather than chemistry, what the roughly right amounts are. So, whereas I would say in my recipe, I will usually end up going with about 4 cups of powdered sugar and about 1/2 cup of milk, I would say if you're trying this for the first time, start off with a total of 3 cups of powdered sugar and 6 tablespoons of milk, added alternately, I would say, 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, tablespoon of milk, back and forth. Then see how you like the taste and consistency at that point. If you want to have more frosting, put in more powdered sugar and more milk. If you want to have it just be, thicker, put in more powdered sugar. If you want to have it be a little bit more liquidy, put in water, not water, milk, whichever you just prefer. If you go above, I would say, 4 cups of powdered sugar, I would probably start putting in more flavors too, just to keep things chocolatey and so forth, but just a matter of personal preference, I would say, rather than any one thing being necessarily the best. I'll skip ahead here a bit so we don't just have 10 minutes of me slowly adding these ingredients back and forth, back and forth. Alright, I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl here as it mixes, just get it all as consistent as possible, not have any little lumps of butter stuck around the edges or things like that. So just nick little things in as it mixes. It's starting to look pretty good though. I think this is a good combination of flavors in this frosting as well as in the cake. Your opponents, or guests I guess we usually call them, won't know what hit them when they taste it. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I think I will get a spoon out here and give it a taste, see how I like the consistency of it. It was very good. I think I could use a little tiny bit more firmness though, so I decided that I would just empty in the last few tablespoons of powdered sugar from that almost empty bag, and that should be just about perfect. Of course, I need to mix it a little bit more. And in the meantime, the cake was almost finished baking too, or at least potentially almost finished baking. So I gave that a few more minutes to mix and then turned my attention back to the cake. I expected it to take a few more minutes here. First I'm baking this recipe in this oven, but it's looking pretty good as I open the door there. So I'll get some toothpicks out and check one and then check the other. You kind of learn by experience what the right feel of it is as you put a toothpick into it, with this and most other recipes, that is. As well as, of course, you can just check to see if it's coming out clean, which is what we want here. And the answer is, yeah, it's coming out clean in every spot I'm checking, so that's a good sign. I'll just get the other one out and check that one too, and then let it cool down some. I recommend letting it cool at least 20 to 30 minutes before trying to remove it. You want it to not be hot anymore, but not be room temperature, to have the ideal time getting it off of the pans, in my experience. The last thing you want is to do all of this work and have everything be perfect, but then have the cake rip while getting it out of the pan. You can still salvage it with well done icing or frosting, but it's really better to just have it come out in one piece, so let it cool. Okay, it has cooled down nicely. So next I'm going to take a sharp knife and just use that to slide around the very, very edge of the pan here and just separate it from the pan so as to get it to be easier to remove. Easy does it. You don't want to slice the cake. You don't want to scratch the pan. Same thing on this pan. This one you can see came out a little bit less evenly. It must have been at a very slight slope in the oven, but that'll be just fine. So then people sometimes get out spatulas for this next step, but that I think is a big mistake. The best tool is simply to use gravity. So I'm going to put a plate on top of it, then I'm going to invert it, and then I feel it carefully and do a little gentle circular wobbling motion as I remove the pan, and it comes out perfectly. You kind of learn with a little bit of practice, and if you just feel carefully, whether it's sticking to the pan or whether you can feel it separating out evenly all around. So here goes the second one. Again, I'm going to put the plate on top securely, flip it over, and then grab it on opposite sides, just kind of gently wobble it around in circles till it comes off. And there we go. Almost perfect again. If you do have it tear a little bit, that's fine. You can cover that over with frosting and no one will know. But it is satisfying to me to know that it came out pretty much perfectly. Alright, I'm going to speed through the frosting because it's kind of a time-consuming but repetitive process. My technique usually is to put about 1/4 to 1/3 of the frosting on this bottom layer, and I'll just take gobs of it at a time, put it onto the middle, and just spiral it outward, and allow gravity to do the work of spreading it more or less evenly around the sides. Then I'll eventually do some touch-up work on those sides before I put the next layer on top. But mostly just start in the middle and spiral outward, and that should be fine for this middle layer at the very least. So be careful of the top layer, of course. I'm going to just take this plate and invert it on top again. Again, that circular wobble is the gentlest way to get it out evenly, I think, without anything tearing. So I do that as long as it takes. And now I'll just do the same thing of just putting gobs in the middle and spiraling them around, but now I'm going to use more of the frosting. And just allow it to spread down the sides, and then I'll touch those up. I'll try to get the top even for this one in particular. It doesn't normally matter that much, but here I want to apply some decorative frosting. That's not part of the recipe, of course, but for this occasion I'm going to want to do that. I'll probably just handle that off camera here, so I can take my time on it. So for that reason I'm going to get the top pretty smooth, but normally I would say that's not super important. I like to get it all covered all around with no patches of cake showing through though, just because again it feels satisfying. But here we go, a beautiful cake. Hope you all enjoy if you make it yourselves. And thank you, everyone. Wouldn't have gotten here without you. Well, I hope any of you out there making this cake enjoy it as much as Mara and I are going to. Certainly turned out well. Until next time, have a great day, everyone.